Hi, and welcome back to our 7 Basics of Belonging. Today we are talking about sacrifice, what it means to put others first. All you have to do is watch a 2 or 3-year-old who has not gotten their way as they scream mine or throw a temper tantrum to know that it is not our natural state of being to be sacrificial or selfless. But in Romans, as Sam will explain in a few minutes, God calls us to be a living sacrifice, continually, day by day, putting others first. In church, we too often think of sacrifice as one moment, the moment we walk down the aisle and we give our lives to Jesus. But when we become a living sacrifice, it is a consistent decision every single day to follow Jesus. Fred Craddock, a pastor and famous storyteller, says it this way: we think giving all our to the Lord is like taking an $1,000 bill and laying it on the table. Here's my life, Lord, I'm giving it all. But the reality is that most of us, God sends to the bank and has us cash the $1,000 in quarters. We go through life putting 25 cents here, 50 cents there, listening to a neighbor's troubles instead of saying, get lost. Going to the committee meeting when we would rather stay home. Giving a cup of water to a man in the nursing home. Usually giving our life to Christ isn't glorious. It's done in all those little acts of love, 25 cents at a time. It would be easy to go out in a flash of glory, but it is harder to live the Christian life little by little. I hope you are challenged and inspired by this video as Sam dives deeper into what it means to be a living sacrifice.
Here we are, the final basic of belonging. And I hope you've enjoyed these sessions. Some of you may have watched them, one after the other. Others of you, your class may have been structured a little differently where you've watched them at different times. However you've watched, I hope that they have been helpful to you. But we're gonna finish up with our final basic of belonging as we talk about sacrifice. And I'll begin by saying this: the degree to which you are willing to sacrifice gives a window into your soul. Sacrifice demonstrates how much you are willing to attain something. So we might, for instance, sacrifice buying something we want today to prepare for retirement tomorrow. So there's some things that I would love to have right now, but you know what? I don't buy them because I need to set aside some money for retirement. We think about maybe professional athletes. It's not something I would know about too much. I would be very much an amateur when it comes to athletics, but professional athletes, they sacrifice time to train in order to do what they need to do. It takes a lot of time, so I have to sacrifice doing something else for the sake of training. Same with master musicians. If you play an instrument or if you've ever been in that world of musicianship, you have to take the time to hone your craft. Or just parenting even. You think about parents, they sacrifice their personal desires to raise children. I haven't watched a movie that I wanted to watch in years. I end up watching all these things that my kids want to watch. Every decision in favor of one area is a decision to deny another area of your life. Sacrifice means putting God's work above your preferences. So we are called to make our attitudes that of like Christ. And we see this beautiful passage in Philippians chapter 2. It's actually verses 5 through 11. We get an explanation of what Christ did on our behalf and how he lowered himself to us. The word there is emptied him. He emptied himself and took on the form of a slave. He humbled himself. He was willing to sacrifice everything for God's plan of redemption. So, you don't join a church to see what you can get out of it. Don't do that. You're sitting here, you've watched all these sessions at this point. Do not join a church to see what you can get out of it. Does the music style fit my taste? Do they have programs that I like? Are the sermons short? Likely if it's like my church, I say that because I'm the preacher, likely they're not short. When you join a church to sacrifice, it's for the mission of God. It's not about you. It's about what God is going to do. It's about kingdom work through the local church. Back to Romans. We've been there before, but let me remind you of what it says in Romans 12, verse 1. It says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Now, we looked at that passage before. What does it mean to be a living sacrifice? If you think about that, living sacrifice. That's intentionally a paradox. I mean, how can you do that? How can you be a living sacrifice? Because sacrifice implies killing and death. To be a living sacrifice is to die to yourself over and over and over again. You put to death the idea that your life is your own, that you have the right to choose however you want to live. That's not what God calls us to do. Notice something there in that passage. It says brothers and sisters, plural, the church together, the people, brothers and sisters. We offer our bodies, plural, as a living sacrifice, singular. It's not us with multiple sacrifices. It's all of us together for one sacrifice. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, did the writer leave off the S at the end of sacrifice? Shouldn't it be sacrifices since we're talking about people offering themselves? Isn't this multiple sacrifices? It's not. It's not plural, it's singular, sacrifice, one sacrifice. We aren't all out there making individual sacrifices on our own. We're in a partnership together as the church, one sacrifice together. So your church needs you. Your church expects you to accomplish God's calling on your life. God wants you to thrive spiritually at your church, to be part of this one sacrifice together. But none of God's work can happen unless you're willing to make this sacrifice. And in many ways, all of the other expectations and all of the other basics of belonging kind of lead up to this one. I mean, you worship sacrificially to give God glory. You grow. These are the basics of belonging that we've walked through. You worship sacrificially to give God glory. You grow because you're living sacrificially. You serve sacrificially by being selfless. You give sacrificially, and it changes the way that you live. You pray sacrificially because your prayers are ultimately about God, not you. And then you seek unity sacrificially by keeping the main thing the main thing. We keep the gospel first and forefront, right there in front of us. All of these seven basics of belonging, this is the glue. This is the one that's holding everything together. Healthy churches have healthy members who are willing to live sacrificially. So I'm going to challenge you with this question. Are you willing to be that member? Are you willing to be that church member that says, I will sacrifice. I will give up my preferences for the sake of others. I will give up what I desire so that what God desires can happen in our church. In order to fulfill all of the basics of belonging and to be that thriving church member, this one's important. You have to be willing to sacrifice. Now we have one more session. We're going to end with a brief session on, okay, I've joined a church. Now what do I do? We'll talk about that here in just a moment.
Congratulations, you've completed the basics. Now what? In this last video, just a bit over 5 minutes, Sam helps you deal with that question. Now what?